Guys, welcome back to Planet Tyro. I'm your host Donald Wanda, and today, as you can see, I'm doing the non-live action video for this little discussion here, because I want to talk about someone very influential, someone that has taken the world by storm, someone who left us, not recently, but fairly recently in the grand scheme of things. I'm talking about Steve Jobs. Stephen Jobs, even though I'm forgetting the middle name. Stephen Jobs was a co-founder of Apple Computer. He died in 2011, and ever since he died, people wanted to kind of put his life to film or to word, or just, you know, spread his life, because this guy apparently had a really interesting life. Let me preface this by saying I was an Apple customer. I was kind of an Apple fanboy, but Steve Jobs, if I was to be honest with you, never really knew much about him until the year of his death. When I started to get more into Apple and I started to hear about the history more, I started to kind of understand more about Steve Jobs, and then he passed away before I really got to understand him. But what happened after that? As soon as he passed away, there was a massive boom for Steve Jobs. Apparently his whole life was like a story. It was like it just had movie written all over it. So the first thing that came out was a book, then these movies came out, then a documentary. Basically, you know, everyone was talking about Steve Jobs, and someone persuaded me to check out the book. I'm not the biggest guy when it comes to autobiographies or biographies in general, but I have to say, I was more or less forced to listen to the Steve Jobs one because it was the #1 bestseller for so long. And after reading it, guys, I have to say, Steve Jobs' life was like a fucking book, like a movie. So I am not surprised by any means that we've had books, movies, documentaries about this guy ever since he died. But you know what? When I read the first book, I wanted to review on Planet Tyro, but then I wanted to wait because a movie came out a couple of years later. Then another movie came out. So you know what? Now I've seen everything. I've read the book, I've watched the movies, I watched the documentary, and you know what? I want to give a somewhat quick review, even though it's been like 3 minutes already. I want to give a review on my thoughts on all the mediums. Should you check out Steve Jobs' biography? Should you check out the movies? I'm going to keep it short and sweet for you guys, so that's my introduction to the whole thing. But let me go through this chronologically, how I went through Stephen Jobs' life. Now let me start with the book. You know, I was actually shocked to find out Steve Jobs was adopted, he came from Syrian heritage, he was fired from Apple, all of these interesting things I found out from the book. And I want to say, one of the things that interests me about the book the most was that the guy that wrote it, I think he's a really good author, and he interviewed Steve Jobs, and he told Steve Jobs, I'm going to do a very unflattering job, I'm going to be brutally honest about your life. And Steve Jobs died before the book came out, so we never got to see how this book came out. And I have to say, this book is brutally honest. It doesn't paint Steve Jobs in the most glorious light, and it's fucking interesting. Stephen Jobs' life is a movie, I can tell you that much. This guy's a combination of a hippie, a nerd, and a fucking asshole, guys. The book is enjoyable. It has those arcs. On the whole, guys, I'm not even the biggest biography guy when it comes to people's lives, but Steve Jobs, man, he had an effect. He affected the world. He was sort of a visionary. I respect the guy, and I don't know what to say. This is a great book. Now, guys, the audiobook is what I highly recommend. Going out to buy the book if you want, but go on Audible, get the book. It is one of the best, even though I haven't listened to many biographies, it's one of the best biographies I have read, because his life is interesting. He's an interesting guy. Even if you're not an IT guy, even if you don't care about Silicon Valley, about the rise of computers, Stephen Jobs is a character. I would just say, if you want to know about someone's life, if you like, I don't know, if you like Forrest Gump, if you just want to know books or stories about a person, Stephen Jobs is interesting. I'll give the book a first class. It's very entertaining. I wasn't even expected to like it, but it did a great job of covering the computer industry, Stephen Jobs, the birth of Apple, you know, it's just an all around good book. So let me move on, because after the book, this movie came out. This next movie that starred Ashton Kutcher. There was a picture of Ashton Kutcher against Steve Jobs. They look so much alike, but there were so many people that are critical. They wondered, can he pull it off? Does he have the acting chops to pull it off? And now I'm going to talk about it because personally, I felt like the movie on the whole was just okay. Let me start with the positives. On the whole, this movie does a good job of covering the first the first 3 quarters of Steve Jobs' life, the birth of Apple, stuff like that. It does a decent job of the coverage. The supporting cast in this movie are great. The supporting cast are fantastic. The guy who plays Steve Wozniak, the partner who co-founded Apple, is great. Then we've got people like Matthew Modine, J.K. Simmons. The supporting cast are really good. The movie is shot like a movie. It isn't like a TV movie like I thought it was going to be. It's shot decently. But let me get to Ashton Kutcher. Ashton Kutcher in this movie he's okay, but he's kind of too young for the role. You know, it just, when I was watching him against the older actors, against the actors that are meant to be the same age as him, doesn't quite look right. The performance that he gives for Jobs himself is okay, but the Kutchiness comes out every once in a while. So, you know, he did an okay job, but it just wasn't. I really think if he did this movie 10 years later in his career, he would look the part and he would have a little bit more chops. But overall, what hurts the movie most isn't Ashton Kutcher. It's the way they do things with the script. The thing that irritates me the most about this Jobs movie, the 2013 one, is that they bring up plot lines and they never fall through with them. Like, for example, there's a whole part where Ashton Kutcher, Steve Jobs, is there screaming down the phone about Microsoft, you stole my idea, blah, 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 blah. But you don't see the trial of that. They don't get into that. They don't get into any ramifications of that. They don't show that interesting part of the story, you know? There's one of the biggest oversights is Steve Jobs and his daughter. They bring that up. It's a running point in the movie about, oh yeah, that's not my daughter. But then they jump to the movie where there's a resolution between him and his daughter, and you don't even know how that happened. So the first half of the movie, he's having that whole thing with his daughter. Then they jump to the point where him and his daughter are okay, but they never show how the resolution. Terrible. That's really bad. And then to top it off, the movie starts off with kind of the launch of the iPod, and it doesn't tail back to that point in the end. So it feels like they edited out, or they didn't plan out how they wanted to start and stop the movie, because it doesn't come around full circle. It starts in the future, then it starts in the beginning, then it comes round to near before the iPod again. It's like, it's messy. So overall, I'm disappointed in the way they constructed the movie on a whole. The acting was pretty good, and this movie is not complete shit. I would give it an okay. So let me move on to the Steve Jobs movie I just saw, which is called Steve Jobs, which is the one with the great director, Ian Sorkin or whatever. Yeah, he did The Social Network. This features Michael Fassbender, and everyone was like, this is the true Steve Jobs movie. This is the one we're really gonna like. Well, let me say for the record, the movie is good and it has fantastic conversations. And that's what the director is known for, writing great dialogue, great conversations. And even the way it's shot, it reminds me of Birdman, because you're always behind the scenes at one event or the other event. But one of the biggest problems I have with the movie is that it throws you in the middle. It kind of starts at the middle of Steve Jobs' story with Apple. So unlike the Ashton Kutcher movie, which covers the birth of Apple, the rise of Apple, this kind of starts way in the middle with the Macintosh's launch, really, and then Steve Jobs' next. So to be honest with you, this movie feels like it supplements the Ashton Kutcher one. So if you watch the Ashton Kutcher one, this one kind of picks up where that one left off, which was kind of weird to me. So this movie didn't do the best job of bringing you in. If you already know about Apple, you know this will be interesting. But if you don't know about the rise, it doesn't cover that beginning stuff of Apple. It focuses more on Steve Jobs and his personality. This movie is more about seeing him as a personality, because we hear him talk. You see more of the stuff you've heard about him being an asshole, and like I said on the Ashton Kutcher one, it focuses more on the thing with his daughter, which you didn't get in the previous movie. So I like this movie because the dialogue is fantastic, the acting is fantastic as well. Michael Fassbender does a really good job, although he looks nothing like Steve Jobs, which is another oversight. But to be honest with you, this movie is more like a supplement to the Ashton Kutcher one, because it doesn't cover that beginning stuff, which doesn't bother me because I already know that stuff from reading the book and watching the first movie. But if you're coming into this fresh, you might be thinking, okay, you know, I know Stephen Jobs' a character, but it's not more about Stephen Jobs, not about Apple. Not a bad thing, but And to me, I'm kind of glad they didn't recover over the Ashton Kutcher movie stuff. So don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing, but I actually thought they were going to retread that stuff. They didn't. So bottom line, I'll give it a high solid B. But again, kind of like, this was a very conversational movie, more about the personality of Stephen Jobs and how much of an arsehole he is. Not much more else. So I'm being very critical, and I know a lot of people probably hate me for saying that. So, but anyway, let me move on to the last thing. Same year, this year, there was a documentary called The Man in the Machine, Stephen Jobs. This documentary, I'll keep it very short. This documentary is for people who are fans of Apple, who have already read the book, who have watched the movies, who want to fill in the gaps. Because again, this has a lot of behind the scenes footage, things with Stephen Jobs at the time, things you've never really seen before. The documentarian did a really good job of getting a lot of behind the scenes stuff we haven't seen before, people we haven't heard talk about Steve Jobs. But I came away just feeling like, out of all of them, this is the one you can really miss, unless you really are into Apple and you really are into Stephen Jobs. But that's pretty much it. And lastly, Funny or Die did a movie called I, Steve, which I'm just bringing it up just because I'm covering everything. It's a parody movie. It's okay for a laugh, but you can completely skip it if you don't really give a shit about watching some comedy. But it was okay. Justin Long plays Steve Jobs, and he did all the Apple ads video, so I can see the wink nudge thing they were doing there. So overall, in final, I'd actually say check out the Stephen Jobs audiobook. This covers everything really well. It's very entertaining, and I just think it does the best job of covering everything the movies do. But if you want to watch the movies, I would actually recommend watching the Ashton Kutcher one and the Michael Fassbender one. I think they supplement each other very well. The documentary is and you know, overall, again, I want to say that Stephen Jobs is a very influential guy. He's someone I respect as a visionary. And guys, if you haven't watched his 2005 graduation speech, this is one of the best speeches I've ever heard in my life. I have to say, you can watch it on YouTube. Obviously, it's on the screen right now. It's actually phenomenal, guys. It's very inspiring. And he just had a lot of very inspirational, interesting ways of seeing things in life. And he made a dent in this world, man. And I respect him. Not a fanboy, but as a person, Stephen Jobs is very interesting, guys. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. I really am not a fanboy, but he is an interesting person. I've said that 100 times, so let's leave it at that, guys. Thanks for watching the video. If you like the video, hit that like button. You can see on the annotations on the right all the stuff we've done here on that Planet Tyro, past, present, and future. Thanks for watching, and I hope you like the style. It's just me with a talking head putting pictures on the screen, but you know, we get more content out this way. So anyway, guys, I hope to see you in the next video. Take care. Peace out.